But the truth of it is, there's so much stuff coming out week to week and every month about a new targeted therapy or new testing that it's not the community oncologist's fault or any oncologist anywhere in the country. It's just literally too rapid to be able to stay on top of if you're seeing 40 patients a day. And if you don't see 40 patients a day, people are waiting a month and a half to see you for their new cancer diagnosis. Then nobody wants to be in that position. And it takes 14 years at the quickest to make an oncologist. So like there just needs to be more. So I think the sooner we all accept that like, okay, yeah, it's tough, it's challenging, it's a great thing, but we all need to work together. These videos, and what I don't talk about or, don't share, it's just the hundreds and thousands of DMs that said, we actually got tested for that receptor you were saying, and we turned out to be positive and we're about to do 4th line chemo and I have a complete remission now, which could be temporary for a year or two. That first message that I got where I was like, this entire, not just patient, but their family's entire course of how this disease process would have been changed because of a 30 to 60 second quote unquote reel or TikTok.
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, my name is Andrew McClendon. I'm your host of the NXT Entrepreneur Podcast. We're here today in the Propel Production Podcast Studio in Baton Rouge and excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Sanjay Juneja. Doc, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it was so fun doing the research on you and hard to fathom all that you do. Chief of Oncology Service at Baton Rouge General Hospital, medical oncologist at Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center, founding medical partner at drpedia.com, co-founder and COO at Medfluencers. You're best known as the Onc Doc, a social media educator and medical influencer with 500,000 followers on TikTok. You've got a couple of podcasts. You host a Target Cancer podcast and working on the Laurel Road for Doctors of Financial Insights podcast. You have 2 YouTube channels with millions of views. You're triple board certified in hematology, medical oncology, and internal medicine. You are published. You're a husband and a father of 3. You got a lot going on.
Got a lot going on. And, I had a poster that I just kind of uncovered last week, and I thought about it. It was a James Dean poster that said, dream as if you'll live forever, live as if you'll die today. And I got it. I just needed something on the wall. I was trying to, had date someone or something, and they said, oh, you need some decoration. So I just got it my freshman year. And I was thinking now, when I do think about how much there's going on and just that celestial will to do things, I'm like, that poster ended up being so apropos, 15 years later.
Well, you're profoundly creative and prolific. I was curious what it is about you that drives that volume of creative content on top of a busy career.
Honestly, I think it's just the feeling of responsibility and purpose. And I know that sounds sometimes kind of corny, and maybe I even thought that at the beginning, but when you do find purpose or feel responsible for something, it really is something that just seeps in and drives you. I was somebody that was kind of a baby by my sleep. I wanted to sleep, later hours and get enough hours and things like that. And the medical track is just so lined up for you, right? It's 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship. You just know the next hurdles. And so I think a lot of that kind of quote unquote purpose, I knew what I wanted to do, but it was after getting that education and seeing what a need there is that for people to learn arguably one of the scariest things, right? A cancer diagnosis, and realizing that it's really underserved. Like patients and people, they have a right to feel nervous about their care and this and that if you're not getting educated, because another corny statement, with education is empowerment. And I think that's so real, and it's lacking not because doctors don't care or whatnot. It's just there's a lot of cancer. There's a few doctors, and why do all that education if you can affect people more than a 50-mile radius and make it indefinite radius to share that same knowledge that you signed up for.
Yeah, and times have changed, right? In the way that we communicate, and some of that is accelerated by social media and continued velocity of platforms and content options. I think maybe possibly some accelerated by COVID and how that impacted things. But it looks like you're putting out great content out there. Some of it's serious and very informative, but some's fun and lighthearted in doing that and having fun with it. If that is like a balance effect of dealing with a job, which is tough. It's scary. You're dealing with patients with tough diagnoses, and is it any of that come into play?
It does. It's funny. You always hear you're going to appreciate what your parents taught you, or these things only when you get older, kind of thing. And one Eastern concept, or really Middle East and much of the Eastern world, is the whole concept of balance at the end of the day, right? Like, we're finite, things are mortal, the things that you can be very serious about, but there's also needs to be time, to have fun. And that whole concept as a whole, just balance, like, yeah, life is serious, cancer is serious, but at the same time, life is short and things are finite. I think all of that somehow strangely fits into the content that I put on social media, which is just like, at the end of the day, again, I keep saying it's like we're all finite and short term, but it's like, I think there's this threading of the needle of a way to be able to talk about things and highlight issues and be an advocate without pounding a fist down, or without making, like, in an ideal world, you'd have all the elements all the time of everything. And it's strange, but that's what kind of TikTok and social media does. It's the right brain, right, on creativity and art. I'm a Gemini, and I kind of fit the mold, except, you always said theatrical or performative. And I'm like, well, I've always been left-brained. And then I realized, actually, that maybe this is the theatrics and performative part that's in, if you believe in astrological, cosmetologic stuff. I think it is that, right? It's therapeutic. It kind of works the brain in a way much different than just studying and doing algorithms and answering tests. So I think it's made me a better doctor for sure. And I think you nailed it. I mean, COVID, but specifically the quarantine, I think will be in history books as far as even in, marketing classes and healthcare classes and politics, about people want to have a little bit more ownership and involvement in their care and knowledge when it came to vaccine, decisions and all of these. And I think it's a great thing. Some people don't like it, right? I think it's maybe not as traditional conservative, and instead, like, this is what we're saying you should do. But, like, really, I think people deserve to know and to feel good about things, or that they're participating in it. And that's what the quarantine did. And so you found this big need. As a blood specialist, I talked so much about type A. People are like, if you have type A, then you have longer COVID symptoms or this and that. So I was able to talk about all that, the antigen stuff. And then you spark this little flame, and people go and dig more and learn more. And I think the world as a whole just gets so much better, if you can just be kind of education facing.
There's a part of it that talking about your social media content in particular, it seems a little disruptive, not in a negative way at all, but just in that it's new and it's refreshing. And I think I've heard you mention that we all come from a past of the doctor spoke, you listened, and you went and you did what he said, and people are engaging now. I've heard you use the term patients and doctors becoming more collaborative. Can you tell us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, with cancer specifically, and this is just in some way an unfortunate but also very fortunate reality, is that the treatments are so, like, just illustriously rapid with what we're learning, right? People think it's, cancers, it's all chemo and it's all poison and hair loss. It's so not that. So that's where I started with the Dr. Pedia stuff and everything. This is what a cancer cell is. This is why it's really hard to treat, and this is why it doesn't go away, and this is why, your immune system can't attack it, but if you make your immune system attack it, you can, and it's super effective. So all this conceptual stuff. But the truth of it is, there's so much stuff coming out week to week and every month about a new targeted therapy or new testing that it's not the community oncologist's fault or any oncologist anywhere in the country. It's just literally too rapid to be able to stay on top of if you're seeing 40 patients a day. And if you don't see 40 patients a day, people are waiting a month and a half to see you for their new cancer diagnosis. Then nobody wants to be in that position. And it takes 14 years at the quickest to make an oncologist. So there just needs to be more. So I think the sooner we all accept that, okay, yeah, it's tough, it's challenging, it's a great thing, but we all need to work together. These videos, and what I don't talk about or, don't share, is just the hundreds and thousands of DMs that said, we actually got tested for that receptor you were saying, and we turned out to be positive and we're about to do fourth line chemo, and I have a complete remission now, which could be temporary for a year or two. That first message that I got where I was like, this entire, not just patient, but their family's entire course of how this disease process would have been changed because of a 30 to 60 second quote unquote reel or TikTok. I mean, that's kind of what I was alluding to with responsibility. All of a sudden, it's almost like I feel irresponsible if I'm not just seeing what it can do to not put it out there, because it literally changes the trajectory.
And it almost seems, I got this feeling, it almost seems irresponsible to not follow that type content. I mean, I like just watching some of your videos and learning so much. You're an extremely effective communicator, and you boil down complex subject matter to where, the layman can listen and understand. You talk about, there being the fear of learning that something may be wrong, and people will put it off, but it's so much better to, find out and learn that. But I had that feeling like you got to listen to this stuff,
Yeah.
It's just great information. So congrats on that.
I mean, thank you. And the one that really I'm passionate about is this iron deficiency anemia. So all the time, the number of messages I've gotten, I thought I was told it's normal to be iron deficient. I thought it was normal to be iron deficient. It's never normal. And that prompts unless you're losing blood. If you're having cycles, you know where the iron's going. If you had a GI surgery and you can't absorb it, you know why you don't have iron. But short of that, if it's new or you're anemic, it is standard of care to get a colonoscopy, plus minus a scope down the mouth to make sure you're not bleeding from, a tumor that could or couldn't be cancerous. Probably not. Right. But I've had so many messages that says they found an early colon cancer only because we saw your TikTok or reel. And then I see all these other, stage 4 colon cancers that are incurable and spread. And I'm like, you've been iron deficient or anemic as a male for the last 3-4 years. If you would have come across a TikTok video or reel or anything that would have said, hey, this is not normal, then, potentially it could have been done earlier. And that's, again, the guilt that I go home with at night. I'm like, people got to know what I just got to find any way to get it out there. And the fortunate thing about social media, or unfortunate for some, but for me it's helped, is a video does not get viewed if it isn't engaging for the first 6 seconds. That's one of the secrets, right? So that's where you have to do this creative stuff. Otherwise, it just gets there's a lot of much more brilliant and better people out there than myself that have been trying to educate for years.
Yes.
But it just gets hidden in the archives.
It's a tough subject, right?
It's a tough subject. And it's unsexy.
Complex. It can be very dry. And so that's where the gift is, right? And taking that tough subject and making it listenable. Right?
Engaged, provocative. But anyone listening, I don't want you to think I could never do that. I don't have that. It definitely takes practice. I didn't come out the gates with this ability to be creative or this and that and the other. It really is a challenge that you learn, and I believe every human actually can do anything, job-wise or anything with enough experience. And it's just another one of those, you actually get way better. So if anyone thinks about it, I could never, do it like that, trust me. It's like anything else, surgery, anything, it just gets better the more you do it.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's dial it back a bit. You grew up in Baton Rouge.
Yes.
Right? I read at one point you wanted to be a science teacher. You had some good teachers growing up.
I did. I had Miss Anna Monet, who was my third grade teacher, Jefferson Terrace, and Dr. Duvall in middle school. I had amazing teachers at Baton Rouge High, but Dr. Duvall and Miss M&A were it's Mr. Duvall. But they started making sense of the world, and I consider myself a layman with a medical degree. Like, I need to make sense of everything before I can just memorize something. And so I was like really passionate about that and just learning about the concepts of friction and gravity. I mean, just silly things. Why does an air balloon go up? And the whole world would never exist if, for whatever reason, the one liquid that when it freezes, it's lighter than it is when it's a liquid, instead of heavier. If that one element, like of H2O, if that was the only liquid that didn't for some reason float when it was solid rather than sink, if that wasn't the case, there would be no Earth, right? Like, I remember hearing that and I was just like, that's insane. Every other fluid gets heavier. But if that was the case, we'd be underwater and there'd be no organic, no life. So just learning all this stuff made me very interested in science and making sense of the world. And that's kind of what I was planning for a while until I got, into a bad car accident.
Tell us about that.
So in that car accident, I got a very bad trauma to my eye. And basically it led for a couple of weeks, from what I can remember at least, to be like completely legally blind, both from the injury and also all the drops and all the stuff required. And I just kept getting asked, like, weren't you terrified you'd never see again? And at first I was like, no, and then I was like, whoa, like, that's strange. Like, why wasn't I possibly worried about it? And then when I thought back, I thought about Dr. Grenier, who's a phenomenal ophthalmologist at Ochsner, and we reconnected since I've come back into town to practice. Still an amazing guy, and I just admire him so much. But he always broke down the mini challenges. First of all, he made me understand everything. I had no medical knowledge. Again, I'm a layman now with a medical degree, and I didn't have it.
You
were
like in what, 10th grade or so?
Right, exactly. And he just told me, well, the pressure's high here because it can't evacuate from the side, and all these things. And basically, we had mini goals to bring the pressure down and said, okay, this is the win. This is the reason to high five. This is what we're shooting for. And that is very much how I treat cancer. My wife treats cancer. Again, it always goes, we're all finite, right? Like, it's like we could win a victory with a cancer, we can win a victory with anything else, or not win victories, unfortunately. But it's all about, like, the process. It's corny. And so people live years now with stage 4 cancer for the most part. I mean, if you're treated effectively, it's years. It's not something that's months unless it's too late. And so I love that about cancer it's something so scary, like potentially losing your vision or having something that's, seems very awful, but then you realize all the victories along the way. You can get into a place where you can't detect it for potentially years. But the mental aspect, where your headspace is, you can go to an academic person that's exceptional and live 19 months with no disease for 16 of them. Or you could live 16 months with no disease for 13 months with them. But in the 19th month, the longest situation, if the whole time you didn't quite understand what was going on, what to expect, what stage am I, that's a very different 19 months than the person that had 16 months but just knew and was confident and proud about when they got that remission, when they tolerated it.
Quality of life.
Exactly, quality of life. But it's all because they understand. It's because they have the knowledge. Again, I keep saying it's corny. By now, everyone must accept I'm very corny. But it's like, everyone has the capacity, I think, and I've been humbled to see over 3 years of practicing, to have tremendous strength and courage. But nobody has strength or courage with a blindfold on. If you put them in the water or a cave, it's terrifying. But when you take it off, which to me is education and understanding, everyone swims and can navigate. And I think that missing piece truly is just like due diligence and what they deserve to be able to learn and understand what they're in for, which is why I didn't fear my eyesight loss. If I would have not been told anything, I would have been just absolutely freaking out, right? I couldn't even walk around, because I was legally blind. I had to get things. I would just be terrified for weeks.
Yeah. So that doctor changed your career path.
He did. He made me want to go into medicine. And, doctor traditionally means teacher. That's why the first doctors were, and are still obviously PhDs, but it's to teach. So I still was able to be a teacher. Just full honesty, I didn't think ophthalmology was for me. I thought, I really went in, and in my second year of med school, I was like, oh my gosh, I took off all these loans, and I just don't know that I want to be in the OR. I'm not an OR person. I want to be able to scratch my nose when I have to scratch my nose. I know it sounds crazy, but I respect so much the dedication. But I was like, what am I going to do? And then I realized how important teaching was, and I had a few letters from patients and their families. I know you're only a med student or a resident, but I just want you to know it made such a big difference on that last week or two when they admitted, and to me that was divine and just celestially orchestrated, or whatever you want to call it, to say that this is what I'm supposed to do.
So how did you pick oncology?
Was probably for those experiences, and just saying where they said, hey, you stuck around. I was like a med student or a resident, so I wasn't the oncologist, but it was very important to me for whatever reason to share and give understanding from the best I could. And I saw the difference, and I got letters from spouses when they're, or kids when their loved one passed away within a week or two. And I think that's what did it. I was like, education, this is what it's for. And I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but sometimes you do feel a little over fortunate, and you might have guilt about it. So I was always somewhat articulate and communicative, and I understand people and dynamics. And I always felt like it kind of ends up in vain. Like I got into med school, like I'm president of this and that. And there was, in retrospectively, a sense of guilt. I'm like, I just feel like people work harder, people are smarter and everything. Why? And only at this point in life, and that's why you really have to follow your purpose, do I feel the full circle. I was like, it wasn't for me. It was to get me enabled to be able to be the best provider and care person through the hardest challenges for these patients and their families. Like it finally feels like, this is why. It felt like it was benefiting, but now I got to go do everything to educate nationally on these like news media and social media channels, as well as in my relationships, in the patient room.
When I think about someone being in med school, pre-med and med school, and it seems all encompassing, but you were engaged. I mean, you were president of the student body at medical school in Shreveport. I mean, it's like next level stuff.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I'm just humbled. I've never actually talked about that poster on any podcast I've done, but it's, again, like, dream as if you live forever, have your goal, be an oncologist, whatever, but live as if you die today. Like, what can you do today? If you're going to point A to point B, we started Shannon Berryhill. She's a physician and MPH down at Tulane, I believe now. We started Tiger Ambassadors, which is now the largest volunteer organization at LSU Shreveport, because we're like, there's no collective, like everything's a specialty group, surgeon, internal medicine, whatever. Like, what about just us as med students for service? So that was a passion. I think that helped with the student body president stuff. But you want to fix, even getting to point B, what you think is your bigger goal. Like, there's no reason, especially if you're blessed with elements, hand, sight, sense, communication, insight, to just do anything you can, along the way. Not with your name associated with it, but if you can, it's almost like a burden or responsibility. It's like, here, hot potato. And so anyone listening to this, you're already learning that, like, getting education out there is going to help. So I hope you were burdened a little bit when you go to bed and say, gosh, I really need to tell people the wisdom and stuff I've learned, because you wield that power, and you should always use it, because the world was very nice to you to give you those things to begin with.
So you met your wife in med school?
I did. Yeah, she was a year ahead of me, and we met really early in med school. And
she's an oncologist.
She is the same 3 board specialties, did all 10 years together while we were up there.
My goodness, you're kidding. Okay, so I was going to ask, how uncommon is that to have 3 board specialties?
It's not. Definitely, it's not common.
You're batting 1,000 in your home.
Well, hematology and oncology, Hopkins and Harvard and these places usually just do oncology because there's a lot there. So that's still 2 or 3 years. And then I believe they expanded their program in New Orleans. But usually Hem-Onc and other places have traditionally been both. But a lot of people just elect for oncology. But I don't know. I mean, it's just been very, like I said, just blessed. Like, we did it all in Shreveport because we had amazing professors that really inspired us with our rounds on them, with internal medicine and all, to want to both do it. Her mom had breast cancer. So she's actually 6 years older than me, and only went into med school passionately to be an oncologist, mind you, 10 years out from me. And that's if you make it. Like, you still got to apply and everything because of her mom's breast cancer. Wow. She was very inspirational for me for that, and pretty much everything daily. I mean, she doesn't get.
That's awesome.
People have no idea. Yeah.
We would like to thank MBD Automation for their support of the NXT Entrepreneur Podcast. MBD Automation is a mechanical install contractor with a program-centric focus. So what do these guys do? They install conveyor systems, VRCs, platforms, singulators, sorters, and all sorts of other types of automated equipment. Who do they work for? They work for systems integrators, manufacturers, and end users in fulfillment centers, airports, mail processing facilities, and projects in the defense industry. MBD Automation works for numerous Fortune 500 companies across the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. If MBD Automation can help you on your next project, you can find them online at mbdautomation.com. Doc, Louisiana is a is a good place for an oncologist to be, right? And when you look at the rankings of Louisiana as far as cancer patients, we're up on that list, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about Cancer Alley here, and generally speaking, I've traveled around a bit, and we probably have a generally unhealthy lifestyle as a bit of a generalized statement. But if you can wave a magic wand over the community or the state, what is it that you wish that you could change about our lifestyle that would most impact our general state of health?
Oof. So, growing up in Louisiana, the reason I came back and, easily chose to practice here is the culture, right? Is the food. It's the hospitality and, even drinking for games, obviously responsibly and all, but the culture is very social, and I think it leads to a lot of happiness, but unfortunately, a lot of it does have elements that we know are just not good for long-term health and especially cancer. To answer your question, that magic wand, and it goes back to this whole Eastern concept of balance and moderation. Everything in moderation is important, number one. But number two, what I think we for sure don't do enough of, including myself, is the exercise part. Right. When people hear you need to go to diet, it doesn't mean a diet. It just means, maybe modify the diet. And all that stuff is great and healthy, but at the same time, you want to enjoy your SUV and all this, all this stuff. But the exercise.
We have great food, and it's easy to consume a lot of it because it's so good. It's not all, some of the excuses that you hear, it's not always the best weather to go out and exercise because of the heat and humidity. But there are people that I know that have left the state that said, they're gone 20, 25 years. They said, if I lived there, I'd be dead.
Yeah, I mean,
because of the lifestyle, which gets to a lot of people. And it's a real thing.
It does. And, you'll read all the time being overweight is 4 times the risk of XYZ. And all that's true if you look at it objectively. But really the main thing is, and what people are starting to say is, I have friends now, especially with this news and social media stuff and all that I've seen, that they're people that are overweight and everything, but they exercise. And that's what's crazy. It's we're starting to learn, especially for coronary health and heart health and stroke stuff, it's not, I wish I could say it's not about being overweight, but because the data still just says that there's a higher risk. But people are believing that it's the lack of exercise that actually, stimulates all that stuff that helps inflammation and all. That's lacking. My friends that are in other cities like Seattle and New York and all that stuff, they're on their Peloton or they're doing something literally 3 or 4 days a week. And that's not me at all either. And so that's the difference. It doesn't matter what you look like. You're not doing it for what you look like or for your weight even. If your weight doesn't change, the exercise alone still does crazily, improving things. And it doesn't have to be running outside. It could be literally swimming, boxing. So Dr. Lamont, a cardiologist here, him and I become good friends. I'm an ambassador for his boxing gym to just get people in there. It's great for aggression, or just the stress or whatever. You don't realize you're doing cardio, but you have an amazing workout. So things like that help. But to modify your question too, if you want to do one thing to help cancer rates as high as they are here, the one thing that I please just ask everyone to do is your screening. Because any cancer, almost any cancer, is curable if it's caught early enough, without even chemo. I mean, if you theoretically caught a cancer when it was 100 cells, you're done. Just cut out liberally the good tissue around it, and it's not going to go anywhere, and you're cured.
Right.
So we don't have many, but the pap smears for absolutely sure. And even if you're postmenopausal and stuff, you still got to get the pap smears. They say that cancer shouldn't exist because the lead time is usually years. So it's only when you haven't had the pap smears at your 2 or 3 year intervals. Colonoscopies, mammograms, PSA prostate stuff, and then if you're a smoker, lung cancer screening, 6% it's ordered in the country when it's appropriate. 6%. And it saves 1 out of 4 to 5 people. It's terrible. That's across the country. 94% don't get it ordered when they qualify. Over 50, 20-pack year smoking. And it's obviously one of the most lethal cancers, especially in the South. You qualify for a low-dose CT, fully covered, to catch that lung cancer early because you can't feel it because your lungs are 2 balloons. How would you catch it early? You get the scan once a year.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, when you heard the C word, it was the worst of the worst news, right? And now we all know several people over the last several years, maybe in our lives, that have had that diagnosis. And, you know, if we're lucky enough, many of them, you know, beat it. What are in the last couple of decades, what are the greatest improvements in treatment that have helped that?
I think it's multifactorial. One, you're catching it earlier. So people are getting screening. People know to look for it. Like, that's always going to be the biggest factor in quote unquote survival, because the earlier you catch it, the earlier the stage.
Right.
And then number two, this whole concept of targeted and molecular therapy and precision therapy and NGS, genomic sequencing, all this stuff you hear, it's all in the same bucket. And that is treating cancers differently than the shotgun approach we did with just, you know, chemo, which is a poison. It's also natural, because I always said, like, oh, I want natural stuff. Most of the chemos were from natural stuff, like, you know, the yew tree and all this stuff. They're actually products found in nature. But that's a very shotgun approach. That's a systemic approach. And now we're doing targeted and molecular therapies, which are way more precise.
I see.
And then immune therapy has really changed the game. Not to undermine it. The game is not the right word, but it's really changed. It's been a game changer, I guess, because it allows your immune system to do what it's always been doing. You've beat cancer already. I beat cancer. All of us listening that haven't had a cancer diagnosis, that are over 21 and even younger than that, have already beat cancer. But our immune systems has killed that cancer cell the moment it was, you know, patient 0, cancer 0, cell number 1, it died.
Wow.
What happens with cancer is it bypassed or somehow avoided that regulatory system you've been doing your entire life and do currently as you're listening to this. And so that's what we realized. Whoa, let's not reinvent the wheel. Make it so your immune system's done what it's always been doing, because we know that works. That's how people stay cancer-free for decades.
You pick up really quickly when you listen to your content is that you have a gift, as I mentioned, about taking the scary subject and making it listenable. And with that, I think that's gotten you to a position where you've really been able to get out there. Your media coverage, you've been all over the place, from CBS, NBC, NPR, PBS. It just goes on and on. Articles in Washington Post. You even were involved in a committee, and you made a visit to the White House within the last 6 months or so. Is that right?
Yeah, it was really kind of progressive. But the White House, you know, they have roundtables all the time. Like I was with the CMO of WebMD, John White, and he is also on a roundtable. So the White House has these roundtables where they have like different kind of like goals to basically help move things forward. And so they made one called Healthcare Leaders in Social Media. And that was a roundtable that was assembled. We met monthly. And their concept was, okay, these people, you know, Dr. Mike, everyone knows who that is on social media. Jay Rutland, I don't know if anyone has these apps, but you've seen these people on your homepage, I'm sure. They said, how do we help amplify the things that are happening in the White House that help with policy or provisions? How do we help people know about it? Because they realize that they're doing all this stuff, passing it through the House, the Senate, and nobody's actually utilizing them, right? Like veterans, like when they take out medical bills because costs are so expensive. Like there's all kinds of programs now where you can get a mortgage without having that as part of the criteria for when you get your credit score checked and all. So there's all kinds of stuff that they're doing in the health space. And then, and the goal was there to just help amplify and get that out there as a product of seeing what happened with medical doctors doing social media education.
Very cool. Let's talk about some of these social media platforms. Medfluencers. We mentioned that in the opening. What is it and what does it do?
So Medfluencers is a company, my friend Adam Goodcoff and I, his handle is See the Med Life. It's all one word. He's an ER doctor and he puts content about all kinds of stuff, right, that he sees in the ER and education and preventative. And we're kind of like the old guys, I guess, on TikTok and Instagram in the sense of we've been doing it for two and a half years or so. I don't know if I would ever have made it if I started now. There's just way cooler people, smarter people, everything. But we got in at the right time. And so over that 2.5 years, we've developed a lot of relationships with these big 10, 20 million follower healthcare media influencers. I don't like the term influencers personally, and so now there needs to be some kind of like community where we can kind of all aggregate and basically find out how can we continue to amplify education well, But you have a lot of companies and, even organizations, like I've worked with American Cancer Society, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Be the Match on contractual relationships with my brand. So like Leukemia Lymphoma Society, I did a series on something called CAR-T. We're doing CLL. You sign a contract, it's 3 to 6 months. You get deliverables, 4 videos. You get paid X amount.
Providing content to them?
No, for them. So it's on your handle. So like, because you have 500,000, 5 million, whatever it is. Right. And then they're able to get their message amplified arguably more effectively than either the company or the organization, because your follower base is exactly that demographic that they're looking for, or cancer relevant.
Okay.
So these deals happen with these social media creators. Sometimes it could be as simple as like a special sunscreen or anti-aging cream stuff that a lot of derm and plastics do. But for me, obviously, it's all cancer-related products that I think are extremely, not products, but updates that people need to know about, because it's standard of care, is gold standard. But we learn that it takes sometimes a year or two to reach the majority of people in the country. That's terrible. But then the company will say, hey, we want to use your handle to be able to say this is the new standard of care, gold standard. And then you get, obviously, that's time, it's effort, and you get compensated. So Medfluencers is to put all that together.
It's bringing structure and organization to...
Nailed it.
This new Wild West kind of means of communicating.
Right. One that's highly effective and really uncharted. And what I found is there's a big company. It's a angel investor that has its own venture capitalist group, and I was on that call with he was the director of, or the head of the Versace marketing, like Versace, right? Like in all the songs. But they offered me a contract the next day to help with their like marketing vision, because it's a whole different world, like marketing in social media as opposed to the traditional marketing methods that have been going on prior to social media. And so it was very humbling. That's what kind of inspired the thought of there needs to be a creative arm of people that know how to do this, that have done it, that can help guide, because textbooks just don't teach it to you. You have to know, you have to have done it to know how it works.
Plus it has to be constantly changing, right? Mm-hmm. And so where do you see that going, Doctor?
So we're actually in seed funding phase now, and I think really ideally it would be to try to, I don't want to say police, but make sure that creators that are getting paid, because there's no policing system. I mean, if somebody says they're whatever, that nobody knows better, and then they could get this product and it could be unsafe. So we have about 100 members now, and we're selective, and we just want to have people in every single category: health, nutrition, like derm, like cardiac, everything that are vetted, that are, obviously educated, have their boards, great at what they do, and then facilitate creative development and again, we would be selective on any company, product, organization that wants to put out a message, how to do that effectively, because there's a lot that people need to know, but the execution is so fundamentally important. And then on the flip side, we just want to help a lot of people like understand how to amplify their voice. I said it earlier. If you've thought about it, that's probably something in this, celestial, again, orchestrated manner telling you, hey, you have something to offer this world, and
it needs to get out
where
there.
Do you start? Yeah.
Doctorpedia, when did you start that?
So that was actually at the very beginning of where social media stuff, at the same time that social media stuff started. And that was quickly in the same concept of my eyesight loss, and basically all the conversations I was having in the patient room about explaining. I was early in my practice, fortunately, so I could sit there and talk for an hour and a half about everything conceptually and fundamentally. What does staging mean? What, why is it staged this way? What is chemo? All this stuff.
And you're doing all these videos.
And so I put it all in video form.
And then the videos are posted on this drpedia.com website.
Yep.
And so you're the chief medical officer for the Oncology channel.
Right.
Within that website. And then there's all these other channels.
All these doctors.
It looked like there are hundreds of doctors on there.
There are hundreds of doctors. I have doctors that filmed like leukemia from Stanford, Memorial Sloan Kettering breast surgeon that actually filmed here. And, I use them for different parts to really speak because they're the experts. So at least any patient can go to drp.com, go to cancer. And now they have all the relevant stuff before they go into their initial visit with their cancer doctor or after, and say, hey, I was supposed to be tested about this, or tell me about this. Or
oh, my goodness. Imagine the
free
quality of the questions that a patient could have, or, the information going in.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And you kind of have to in the community, just in the country, unfortunately.
So how does that compare to like WebMD, though? The thing that started 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Is it similar?
I think the biggest thing...
I'm not that familiar with WebMD.
Yeah. No, I mean, the biggest thing is WebMD is all video form. So I tried to make it as easy as possible. And I even outlined, these are the cancer basics. This is lung cancer basics. These are the kind of lung cancers.
Right.
And so I wanted it to be more streamlined because everyone, including myself, has thought they've had cancer or something terrible because of WebMD. And it's not because they're misleading you, but you're just, if you don't know, like basically the workflow, like you find one thing, you take one picture at a moment, it's gonna be misleading.
It's not granular enough,
right?
Necessarily,
right. You almost want a chapter one and then go on forward.
So, how do you measure the success of that venture, Dr. Pedia?
I mean, to be fully honest, everyone has a learning experience. All the entrepreneur books and autobiographies I've read is like you fail a few times, or I wish that one was run better. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and it means so well, and there are a lot of doctors involved. I think there needs to be a more optimization and that's where someone like you has all the wisdom, is how do you take a product that is obviously very like resourceful and does a lot of good, but then actually make sure, it's all doctor funded. Like we all paid, significant amount just to get the content out there for our patients. And I just hope it stays. But how do you make that marketable is another piece.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to talk about COVID and the impact to your business, right? I mean, you're really just starting in your practice the last few years, right? And COVID comes knocking on the door beginning in January 2020. How did that work?
I empathize for sure with a lot of professions, medical or not, that took a huge hit. It was I can't imagine. In cancer, the treatments don't stop. I mean, you don't. Fortunately, the people that are going for cure or being basically kept alive from their treatment, like there was no week or 2 weeks or anything off from clinic. So it was nice to at least be able to afford people, or basically spare people, the thought is, I'm doing really well, I'm beating my cancer, and now I have to not be able to just because of something else external to me. That was my biggest fear. And then on the heme side, there was a whole bunch of blood clot stuff and weird stuff when it came to COVID that we were rounding in patients. It was a scary time, and it was
from the vaccine, or
no, from the virus. The virus, yeah, they had that. I have a few videos on the vaccine part, but we knew that it causes calamity with the blood system, well before the vaccine stuff. So it was a strange time to be at the evolution of the understanding of something. So that was. It's just, a lot of it was just very depressing. But the hardest thing was when people started getting new referrals in for non-cancer or it was cancer, is so many people had a delay in their biopsy or their imaging or anything else that may have been the difference on a curable to stage 4. And then when they get the question, well, this was scheduled 6 months ago, doctor, do you think like if I could have gotten that colonoscopy, which was quote unquote elective, that, we could be looking at a cure, or that I wouldn't be, quote unquote terminal. I don't like that term either. That's hard. It's continued to get that question.
That's just devastating.
It's devastating to give a cancer diagnosis and all that to begin with, and why me? But then on top of that, you throw in a whole nother variable of, even despite all of that, it could have been different if it wasn't this year, this time, this, cascade. Events.
Yeah, it's hard when you consider that the government makes these mandates. And there's a million different scenarios for, and that can apply across the board, whether it's loan forgiveness, student loan forgiveness, and how that can be fair to some people, unfair to others. And in this scenario where you question, like, how could it be possible that these people that were in this situation couldn't get access to this, service, and it was detrimental to their lives. I mean, COVID may have been as well had they gotten that, but that's hard to fathom.
It's hard to fathom, but at the same time, if you've read these kind of like end of the world scenarios, you definitely want to overcorrect. This is purely my opinion, but at the beginning, I think people do forget, but we were all terrified, right? Like I'm talking those first couple of weeks.
Right.
And so when you can appreciate what infectivity and infectiousness means, and you were seeing what was happening with these like declines in healthy people, I mean, it is a very scary thought to do an elective procedure with, again, a GI doctor that also takes 9 years or 13 years to train, like, out of high school, and then all the techs and all the stuff, and exposed to where you don't know if 2 out of 4 will just pass away the next week. Like that liability.
Yeah.
It's very, it's tough because retrospectively it's like, oh, it was probably overkill. But if it didn't work out, there'd be no retrospect, first of all.
God.
But yeah, so that's where I think
that would be tough. Hannis Bourgeois provides accounting services, litigation support, as well as tax and assurance services to companies and individuals throughout the region. With offices in Baton Rouge, Denham Springs, New Orleans, and Hammond, their team of professionals have a wide range of specialized expertise and give personalized attention to each client they work with. HTB serves all types of business structures, including corporations, private businesses, startups, individuals, and more. So call them today to learn how they can help you. Reach out to them by phone or learn more at their website, www.htbcpa.com. A little testimonial here. HTB has been my accounting firm for over 30 years and have guided my initial company from startup to expanding to numerous operating companies. HTB has provided guidance in helping us expand across the U.S., doing business in more than 30 states. Flat out, HTB has made all the difference in the world to our business. This podcast is sponsored by NAI Latter & Blum, Louisiana's leading commercial real estate firm, offering expertise in every discipline, including office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and corporate services. Their agents guide you through the real estate process from start to finish, using a host of marketing, prospecting, and analytical technologies. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the most trusted name in commercial real estate, NAI Latter & Blum. Learn how they can work for you at www.ladderblum.com. So you actually started your social media posting during your fellowship, right?
I did. It was my chief year, but my wife had moved to Baton Rouge already to start practice, right? So she moved with the kids, and I was chief fellow, which was busy, but I was kind of like, I want to do something right-brained, And so that's where it was so serendipitous. I mean, it was just this silly video that I logged into where you basically sync up the words. And I was like, this is something totally anonymous. TikTok is nothing like Instagram and Facebook where you have a profile and your followers know you. That's not TikTok. TikTok is a black bubble where unless you share your username, no one knows you. And when you put something out into that black bubble universe, only the people that are interested or see it start following you. So it's very anonymous. And I liked that element because as a doctor, as a chief fellow and all this stuff, I couldn't post any of that stuff on, Instagram or Facebook.
Right.
So I love the anonymity. And then when I started getting a lot of followers for silly stuff, dancing and all this stuff, that whole concept of, balance and not in vain, I was like, I reached 10,000. I'm like, I got to do something productive with this because otherwise it just feels in vain. And then that's where I started talking about actually gender bias in medicine was where I started because my wife's blonde hair, blue-eyed, and very smart, got a master's at Tulane, and she's treated so differently, right, than me as a male, even though we're all the same specialties. So I started talking about the bias aspect, and then I started talking about cancer.
Really? So do you remember once you started talking about serious content, a video that went viral that made a difference?
The difference in a productive way?
Difference in a productive way or in your number of followers or anything like that? I
had a bunch that went into the millions talking about COVID while it was happening.
Really?
Because, I'm talking, it kept me very, engaged with the news, well before weeks, stuff came out. I remember everyone just roasted me. They're like, you're gaslighting. The Olympics were not canceled. Nobody said that, and they ended up being canceled. And when I said, it's probably going to be canceled, and nobody's going to ever, not be able to do flight stuff. I mean, it was all just, and you have to get used to it. You have to have thick skin in social media. You have to know. But my point in saying all that was just, it wasn't gaslighting. It was very straightforward and objective. But then after that, just talking about the concepts of everyone's like, do I take an aspirin or not? And then I talked about what aspirin does and why it stops blood clots. I talked about the type A versus type O, who gets what symptoms. I talked about super tasting and blood type with getting this loss of smell. So all the heme, stuff, those went very viral. I think that kind of helped get a lot of people on board, I guess, with the education concept. And then the one that's my largest video, I think it has like 5.1 million.
Oh my goodness.
Was really a comedy, but also serious. I'm just barking at the camera. I'm like, all right, intern pro tips. These are the things that you don't do when you're starting your intern year. It was July. And it's just silly, but I'm like, don't put your stethoscope in your pocket because when you pull it out, everything's going to puke out, like all your documents and everything like that. And then I was like, don't, button your coat because then when you, before sitting down, because when you do, like, you're a caterpillar. And just fun stuff. And I had thousands of comments saying, not me as an accountant sitting here and watching every bit of 90 seconds. Not me as a lawyer, like I should be studying for my bar. Like it was just cool because it was relatable and they're all idiosyncrasies that happen in medicine. And so that was a fun thing.
Yeah, that's funny. So how is TikTok different from Instagram? I mean, you have like 500,000 reach on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm. And about 39,000 on Instagram. So Instagram is more volitional, like you find a person, you go follow them, like because you know them, same way in Facebook. And it's kind of, and then when people start sharing your stuff on Instagram, they're like, oh, I'll follow them for education. But TikTok, anyone without any videos or any following can post a video and go viral with that one video. Yeah. And so TikTok headquarters have contacted me and they invite me to their headquarters every now and then in California. Just 4 weeks ago, yeah. And so I've been at the kind of like, known about the evolution of this since the beginning of really when it came out, when it was called a different app. And all that matters is when that TikTok goes out, it gets piloted to about 10 people, 10 to maybe 20, not even that high, random. And based on how long they watched it or how long they scrolled through, that single-handedly dictates then being promoted to the next phase where all of a sudden you see it gets shown to 10,000 people because it thinks it's going to do well. That's it. That's a secret. That's what people pay a lot of money to creators for. Not myself, but others. That is the secret. First 6 seconds, stay engaged, and then that pilot of that video will really dictate the life of that video. And that's the beauty of TikTok. On Instagram, if you have 0 followers and you open an account, there's no way you're going viral on one post. TikTok, if the content's good, if it's catchy, it just gets blown.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We've talked with a few people who, are kind of describing where they see TikTok going as a really valuable tool to like look up something to do, like they would do on YouTube, and
I've learned a ton of life hacks from TikTok.
Yeah.
Just things to do with kids, how to not spill stuff. I mean, you can get into the world, into the very niche of just like automotive engine people that just do this, of wood makers. I mean, it's incredible what you can learn about.
You can go down a deep hole real quick. So let's talk about your podcast, Target Cancer. You've got a lot of content out there. So you're engaging people, right? You're doing some Zoom or...
We do like a video podcast.
Yeah. And so you'll be interviewing some people in the process and getting that content out there. How are you enjoying that?
I love it. It's been...
What do you love about it?
So humbling. Just because everyone that's just more brilliant than I am and learning so much.
Yeah.
So it's like an hour we film and we get on a call and we get to know each other well. I had the first Obama appointed, Greg Simon, the first executive director of Cancer Moonshot. He was my guest, and that was just crazy to hear about how all that unfolded and developed. The gentleman, Dr. Keith Flaherty, who basically founded combination targeted inhibitor therapy in melanoma, from Harvard. And last week, and this one's really, I was fanboying about, was Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee. He was the Pulitzer Prize winner that wrote Emperor of All Maladies. If there's one book that you've always heard your whole life, and I get it all the time in my DMs, have you read Emperor of All Maladies? I'm like, of course, I'm a cancer doctor. But that's where it's the whole concept of cancer in one book. He was on my podcast, which was obviously extremely edifying. So I'm actually writing a book currently that's trying to get everything that I've been putting through Doctorpedia and through cancer and through all these little bite-sized videos into one book. And that book is called, aptly named, I think, It's Time to Cancel the Term A Cure for Cancer. And it has a strike through. And if you heard me just say that, you're like, I cannot believe you'd say that. It's like, it's not it's not curing cancer that's a problem, but it's saying a cure for cancer. It will never be one cure. And I think that's where a lot of the misleading and misperception is to think it's one entity. There's hundreds of disease processes that are all very different. The treatments are different. Your uncle's story and your mother's story, it's just not going to be your story. And that's what precision medicine and targeted medicine is. And that's what my podcast talks about. If you listen to my podcast, if you binge in one weekend, you're going to understand cancer in ways that any dinner table that you're at, you'll be able to explain why things are the way they are.
That is fascinating, and so much needed. I mean, it's a mystery to so many people.
It is, but the worst thing is how there are people out there that take advantage of false hope, right? And I have people that came in after doing 3 or 4 months of oils or whatever, and they're like, Doc, he was crying. I still remember this person. He was like, I spent $90,000. They promised whatever. The dude is completely emaciated. And he had seen me as an initial, not me, the other fellow, as initial consult before he decided to go alternative. And he's got $90,000 bills. He's going to leave his family with it. And he progressed for something that would have been very treatable.
Oh.
And so that's the primary driver is the fear. Again, it all goes back to education and empowerment. The fear of not knowing makes you do things that otherwise you wouldn't have done if you would have known better. That doesn't mean that herbals don't work, that oils don't work. I believe there's space for all of that stuff. But you'll be shocked how many people either don't get treatment for like a easily curative resected therapy just because somewhere in Louisiana they found out what happened to their grandmother and they're like, I don't want that to happen to me. And it's just not the same thing. And so that's the tragedy because the way to fix any of that is education and hopefully my book.
So if people want to find your content, they can subscribe to your podcast, Target Cancer, but you also have all of that you got a couple of YouTube channels, right? You got your Target Cancer YouTube channel, has all your videos, all your content.
Right.
And then you have the Onc Doc.
Right.
Where you have some of your other videos, your video shorts, your reels.
Doctorpedia. It's just kind of, it's messy. I need to clean that up actually. But you will see the whole evolution from when I started because I'm still trying to figure out my space in that one. And
but it's cool to see your stuff on Instagram or TikTok. But it's also cool to go to your YouTube channel
and have it archived
and have it all there and kind of doing some picking and choosing.
That's my next goal is to just in the next month have it all buffed up because that education really needs to be out there and accessible.
So we've talked about this, you becoming a medical influencer in the process and getting traction and now people reaching out to you to get advice on how they can do the same. It struck me, we've had a couple of guests on here that define themselves not as medical influencers, but influencers in their fields. And I think what, for someone like me that all this is a little hard to follow, but I think at the root of it is the success for you and others like you is you just being yourself. When you're either communicating the serious content, the important content, or if you're having fun, lip syncing something, and it just makes it more approachable.
I'm so glad you said that because that is a challenge when I've helped mentor younger creators is you start to lose yourself a little bit. You start being influenced by other comments. You want to hop onto a big political issue or society issue, and you feel somewhere in there not right, like it's not something you'd speak on. You nailed it. You really have to be yourself because the moment you start worrying or caring about the follower count, this and that, and that's the whole concept of not doing it in vain and finding purpose. As long as you stick to your purpose, for me, I don't think anything would have worked out right if it was for my name or me to make it on TV or something. My purpose every day is to make people more comfortable, educated, and correct on their understanding of cancer and cancer updates. That's all I care about. Yeah. And whatever your purpose is, whether you're in medicine or not, you just got to make sure you stick to it because it's very swayable when your numbers start coming up.
So I saw recently you were at the Best Dress Ball for the American Cancer Society, and something viral happened there. Tell us about what went on there.
Yeah, so that event, I work with ACS nationally too, and my good friend Rachel Aggie is a hairstylist. She has a successful salon here, but recently she's been working with our cancer patients, me and my wife's, and others, and people in our group. And I'm not sure what the impetus was, but she's been doing it for a while now. I mean, it takes months to see her otherwise. But when I have a patient, I had a lawyer, unfortunately in their 20s, lost hair. It was just so mentally troubling, the whole process. It came out of nowhere, just graduated. And I still remember that next visit. She came and she was just like, I can't thank you enough for introducing me to her. She got me in. She made me feel encouraged and, beautiful again, or that I can get through this, etc. It's a very common practice. I mean, I hate, and I'm used to it on social media. I hate when you hurt someone's feelings unknowingly. I used to say battle cancer or fight cancer. A lot of people get hurt and upset when you say that, because they're saying if anyone that lost you're saying they're a loser. So there's always a way you can hurt someone and not even realize it. And so I've learned a lot. Right. The key is not to say, battle fight. I'm just saying it. Just listen. I get that. That hurts.
Right.
So what a lot of people do for fundraisers, we did it every year in medical school at St. Baldrick's. It's an event where you buzz your head to show your support for cancer and get cancer funding. One of our oncologists that was a big reason me and Lauren went into cancer, Dr. Marion, he did his last year, and he had the longest hair. So that gesture was something that she not only wanted to do, obviously in support, but the main thing was she's educating a lot on TikTok and Instagram. And so a lot of people are starting to come to see her to get tips that she gives our cancer patients on what do I do at this length of hair and this length of hair, and how can I style it. So that process she can actually archive and document to help other women, much in the same way that I can help people, my cancer patients I see here, but also help others with education. She wants to be able to help in that capacity.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But, everything is like a learning. I think some definitely, I can't imagine what it's like to be in a situation with cancer and have chemo. And I think that was maybe hard to remind her. And when we did it in medical school at LSU, it was around St. Baldrick's. So I just hope. My wife always tells me, she's like, it's always intentions. At the end of the day with social media stuff, when I was earlier and people would, get offended that I wore pink and they're like, it's so commercialized. Do you realize it doesn't actually donate? And you get thousands of comments. And she just says, Sanjay, it's all your intention. Do you mean well? What are you trying to do? And and that goes back to what we were saying earlier. Don't be swayed, because when you do something out of your comfort zone, that's something in vain, whatever, that's where it can have real dire consequences when you hurt someone or do something you didn't intend. But as long as you have that purpose, which is how we opened up this conversation, I think that's the safest thing.
So the viral event was you buzzed her hair, you shaved off her hair in that event, right?
Right, because she was honored and I was honored, and then we were there together, and it was her stage. So on my TikTok, there was reception was kind of what it was for any of my other videos. But it was just on Instagram, specifically for the community, that I think, I don't know if people, they're not aware of the gesture. There's several fundraisers and organizations that do it for the same reason, that don't, that aren't getting treated. But it went viral.
I saw that, and I was, I don't know, did the crowd gasp or something? I thought I heard something. I was like, it seemed unexpected. And
it's bold. I think a lot to people.
Yeah. I mean, she's a hairstylist, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of her trademark. So
it's power. It was powerful to me. I cried. Lauren cried. She's breast cancer. A lot of her friends did, and the messages were outpouring. Media came in. I was like, well, let's hold off of media. But just, you see these stories if you YouTube it about people that do it to show their support. It's just so scary to do that, I think, for a lot, because of the implications.
So what is your vision for the next phase of your business or your career?
I always want to be a physician first, and I'll never let something get in the way of giving the maximum quality care and time and education. I don't know. People have been asking me that for years, and if I would have had an idea, I wouldn't have had a lot of the things that are going on today if I had something hard set. So my ultimate goal, if I could wave a wand, to use your example, would really to be more in advocacy and health equity. So there's so much disservice because of insurance plans and because of income and all this stuff, where there's a ton of literature that shows the cancer care there's disparity depending on the color of your skin, depending on your income, depending on where you live. And to me, that ethically is more sickening as somebody in the healthcare system in oncology, and more embarrassing than anything else. Is that something that we're spending billions of dollars to get better treatments, billions of dollars to detect earlier, but we're not even addressing the fact that with what we have and what we know we have today, the difference of people that live in a big city, go to academic, again, skin, income, Latino, that needs to be like louder. And I think, if money and loans weren't an issue, like I would just go full force on that, because people deserve to be treated equally when it comes to their own life, especially relating to cancer.
Absolutely. Look, it's hard to do research about you and not see how important it is to you about being a great dad.
Yes.
A great father to your children. So I was curious, as we wrap up, what are the things that you do to be the best dad that you can be?
I think if I've learned one thing, it's to like not think anything is too advanced or underneath, like having that like a full on emotional, like respectful conversation with your kid. Like, I mean, even at 2 or 3, it's amazing the things I've heard from them where I just like really sit down and talk and ask. And I just want them to feel every day like so loved by their dad. Like every day, that's my goal, is to like, to where they just like wake up. And Usher, my older one, and my middle one still say that. Like when they scream daddy, like my wife said the other day, she's like, it's not fair. She's like, when they see you, she's like, they just act like you're a celebrity. Like it's daddy. But it's because you just saturate them. We used to do very, very rigidly, like when we were in training, like the bedtimes and stuff. And I know people are going to judge me for this, but recently with both of us on call and both of us like just working so much and seeing a lot of death around us and people our age or younger, we just have loosened that up. We let them sleep with us because we know they're going to want to stop. We don't know how long we'll be around, because you're very humbled in this field. You don't know how long they'll be around. And it's just like, again, dream as if you'll live forever. They'll live forever, but live as if you'll die today. Like, I think I've been more lax and more just present and not taking a day or a week or a month for granted with them, for both me being around to experience it or for them to be able to be around.
That's very cool. Doc, thank you for sharing your time with us. I know you're an exceptionally busy man, and you've accomplished so much. So you're early in your career. I look forward to continue to watch everything that you do. So
I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, great impact in our community, and it's much
likewise. I admire you, admire everything you have going on, your foundation. I mean, there's so many good things. Y'all are the people that really are the examples, I think, for me and others that are doing this that I've graduated with. They're just like, these are the people, and the only way you can do that, and that's what you want ultimately, is to help the people that are younger. So I hope to be in that position one day to say, this is how I can help. But I appreciate you for that reason and everything you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Everyone listening.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, now that was fascinating. I don't know that I've seen a clear example of how the communication between doctors and patients is changing than the way in which Dr. Juneja explained it to us. And it is absolutely fascinating. It's about getting information out there, educating the public, patients that he may never ever see, but getting the message out there. He's not only a leader in that new way of communicating, but he's also engaging in business opportunities to make that available and more efficient to other medical professionals so they can excel at that as well. Just absolutely fascinating. His tireless energy is just very, very impressive. So we really appreciate him coming in and sharing his stories with us. We just have great respect for what he does and his energy. We appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur Podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.